Hi, Michael.
Hey, Mark Antoine, how you doing?
Not bad yourself.
Pretty good. It's been a good week.
Okay, I was wondering if we'd have quorum today, not a given.
Yeah, Bentley mentioned in there he's might join, but will be quiet.
Yeah.
I was just
Same
watching last week's video, and you said something. I think you mentioned claim miner. Is that
Yeah,
you're saying? What is that? Is that yours or is that?
that's mine. Yes, that's something I've been doing for Jamie actually.
Okay. Yeah.
It's basically a kind of document store with embeddings, and then break up the document in paragraphs, and it's about finding things around a given claim. What's like you say, oh, here's a claim I have. What are paragraphs in the documents in the neighborhood of that claim, and can I connect them? And is that connected to that? And can we create a kind of database of claims? And
That's very interesting. Is that open source online or anything, or can I see
it
it?
wasn't until very recently.
Wow.
It wasn't for a while, and then basically Jamie was because there's some things I couldn't open source, and then finally I split the project, so there's an open source section.
I'd love to see it.
Okay.
Just yesterday I was looking at, like, I've got this little mini project I want to do about summarizing and extracting claims, really. And so this is right up that alley. I was looking at LangChain and Llama Index yesterday about which one should I use.
So this is it. I guess I could trying to think how I can show it.
It's okay, even though I got the link, I can take a look, which is at least something.
Yes.
Did you use any libraries, or is it all just built yourself, or what?
I mean, I'm always using libraries, I guess.
Yeah.
It's Quart, Python. Quart is the web application. SQL allows me to talk to the database. The embeddings use PG vector, so they're stored in Postgres. I mean, you heard the conversation we were having between PG vector versus Quadrant versus specialized vector databases. And according to our friends at Argiflow, the PG vector is much less powerful. It's entirely possible I didn't do the benchmarking job they did, but it's worked well enough for me, to be honest. I find it quite adequate.
I wouldn't have anything really to comment on it. I don't know anything about either. So
I mean, of course, a specialized database will do more, but I like the versatility of saying, okay, I'm trying to see how I could show this because it's becoming a topic. Problem is the version I have on my server shows a bit more than that's the one.
what are you using? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, it's a bit hard. I should prepare a demo, and I haven't done so. Sorry.
That's okay. That'd be amazing. I'd love to see that. What are you doing specifically for? So if you have a bunch of text and you want to extract the claim or identify the claim, what exactly are you using for that?
I'm not doing that yet. What I'm doing is, and you enter text or a claim by hand, and then you will look. I'll show you. Oh, here are relevant paragraphs in the documents. Extracting the claim from the paragraph would be indeed a very interesting thing. Though one thing we have started playing with, which is in Claim Miner, is, and that's something I could demo, I guess. It's basically saying, oh, here's a prompt. And the prompt takes the claim and a bunch of paragraphs you've selected. Like it will give you a bunch of paragraphs and you say, okay, I want this one, this one, this one, this one. Give me the first 10. And then I'll feed that to ChatGPT and say, okay, can you tell me what are the main claims that are related to the original claim that are in those text paragraphs? And then it will say, okay, well, what is said is this one from this one. And from this paragraph, I can extract this claim. From this paragraph, I can extract this claim. So I'm basically using a prompt to get ChatGPT to do the claim extraction.
That's interesting. See, and that's what I've been generally thinking I was going to do first. But then based on some of our conversations, you're like, well, this is kind of already solved in academia. And so I started looking, I was looking through, you know, Semantic Scholar and building up, I'm going to start building up a graph of like, what are the latest tools to extract claims? Like, could you, I'm guessing it would be less expensive to run a corpus through some type of NLP rather than like NLP tool rather than ChatGPT or like an LLM. So I'm in my mind, I have this idea of running it through a bunch of different, like a chain of tools.
Yeah. I've been thinking about what are the next steps. I mean, right now what I've been doing is very much driven by Jamie's idea of next steps. And I've been in, you know, oh, we could do this, we could do that. But it's true that I didn't dig as deep as I could. And one thing I've been thinking about is, I've been looking for quick wins, let's face it. Of course, it will cost less if we use an open source LLM rather than ChatGPT. And because it's LangChain, it's pretty easy now to plug and play. I use LangChain to talk to the system, so I could plug and play there. And I've made, there's a lot of things in the back end that, oh, what thing do you want to use? I mean, the front end doesn't have all the choices, but in theory, I could plug and play the systems. Now, the other really interesting, I've been thinking about claim extraction using NLP. NLP will give you, it's not that good at claim extraction, to be honest. It will give you a parse tree. One thing I've been thinking about is,
sorry, it'll give you what? Parse tree?
A parse tree, like this is the grammar tree of the sentence. Yeah. It will do entity identification. But as far as finding the claims, there's a lot of academic stuff, but it's still pretty experimental. It's very much work in progress. It's not fully done yet. I've been playing a bit with a rule-based system that applies on a spacey tree and extracts, oh, because I have this pattern in the spacey tree, that looks like a claim with this entity, that entity, that entity. So that's doable. And there's rule systems based on spacing, but I've been trying to build one because one I found, Hammurabi, was very much implementing linear rules over, whereas if you have a tree, use tree matching rules. Using linear rules feels a bit silly, but that's just me. So I did a little experiment in that direction. Let's see where it is. No, not that. That's public. Pretty sure it is. So that was my attempt to play with rules. This is very primitive and trying to, I didn't develop it beyond the point, but still it's a little toy. It's a toy at this point, but I'd like to go further with that toy.
It's getting me to log in here first.
Oh, maybe I think it's public, but I'm not 100%. Check.
Oh,
Project
I
review.
have, hold on a sec, that's what
Should be public.
I was grabbing something off of Sci-Hub, so I needed a VPN. No, it's getting me to do all these verifications, and I was wondering why. That makes sense
I
now.
see.
Wow, it's doing this. Yeah, so what my plan is to try and figure out, okay, what are all the different ways people have used to try and identify claims? And like you said, parse tree or rule-based, or the first article that I found is called Claim Buster. Well, they introduced this thing called Claim Buster in 2017. They published more since, but only up to 2020. But in
Okay.
this claim buster, they claim is end to end, like it'll extract the claims, it'll see if it exists already as like a, they did all the 2020 or the 2016 election, I think, ran through a bunch
Okay.
of different data sets there and released the data set as well. But they also have one of the specific parts in their chain they called Claim Spotter, and they have that actually online as an open API as well. And so I tested it once, it was interesting. But I'll give you the link to all of it. But what they do, go ahead.
No, definitely interested in that. Yes.
What they do is they say the claim spotter, so it gives it a score between 0 and 1, whether it's likely or not to be a claim. But I don't know exactly how they were going through it off the top of my head. But that's the link to the
I
web.
see this before because I saw something like this. But I'm not sure. No. I saw something like this, but not this one. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you for this one.
Yeah, and here's their GitHub. So because it's open source as well. So
Cool.
apparently, I haven't looked through what's actually in the GitHub yet, but it's on my to-do list.
No. That's really cool. No, I'll have a look and fact checker. I saw something else do something like that. I'll try to find it. But another thing I was shown recently that's really interesting. It's OntoGPT. Is that the one? I think so. Yeah. This is something that supposedly does creates a knowledge base using GPT from text.
That sounds interesting.
So that's definitely something promising there. But definitely I'll look into Claim Buster, and I'm trying to find the other one I found. What was it again? My archival techniques suck.
Yeah, anytime you find any of these things, shoot me the link. I'm going to start collecting them. I subscribe to a feed on Semantic Scholar, and it keeps like emailing me. And it seems like there's quite a lot to go through.
Yes.
So I just want to try and like pull out the patterns that I see and go from there.
That sounds good. I'll definitely have a look at this. Yes, and keep me posted as well. This is definitely something I'm curious about as well.
Unfortunately, though, I'll be using the Node version of LangChain, not the Python, and I know it's probably a problem. It's probably not as powerful.
Why? You're not a Python person?
I used to do Python, and I like it, but I've learned a little bit more, and I'm currently working with React and JavaScript and a little bit of TypeScript. So I just kind of want to lean into that because I still need to learn a lot, and so I want to kind of pick a path.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with like TypeScript. JavaScript has eaten the world pretty much, but Python is doing. You've been following what's happening with Mojo language. I feel that Python's making a comeback thanks to that.
It was which language?
Mojo language.
I haven't heard. Sorry.
Mojo language. It's really interesting. It's Chris Leitner of LLVM fame has developed a new language that is basically a Python-like, but also contains all of Python. And basically the parts that are Mojo compliant with typing this, that, and that will compile to this incredibly optimized Python. And the part that's are not will use Python. So it's kind of, you have the best of both worlds because you've got the full Python language, but some parts can be ultra optimized. And his point is to use that for large scale LLVM stuff.
Interesting. Well, with the rate in which this is penetrating everything, LLMs, I guess, sounds promising.
Yeah, sorry, LLM. I said LLVM. I mean, he's the LLM guy, right? Yeah, not finding that other thing. I'll try to send you when I find it. It's really interesting. But the one, it seems, the one I had found seems less user than this claim busters stopper. So I'll definitely look into that. I'm really curious. So that's Python based as well. Excellent.
It's interesting that they've stopped publishing and updating, so that
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, but still might be worthwhile. So
no, I'm definitely going to look into that. Thank you.
mm-hmm.
UTA research. Oh. Very interesting. 30 branches, 0 tags, 2 issues. Unable to get API access, the latest issue. Okay, I definitely want to look into that. SVM, bidirectional LSTM, and adversarial training on the 25th. Okay. Cool.
I'd be interested also, like, I imagine I'm eventually going to get there to see like what, well, I'm sure some people have done it to see the results of fine-tuning an LLM or fine-tuning, well, yeah, specifically for claim extraction. But can that be done as a general claim extraction, or is it specific to, okay, these are political claims or these are X domain claims? I don't know the answer to that question. Like, I imagine if it's domain specific, it's better or results, but I don't.
That's a very good question, and I do suspect it will be domain specific. This is not my NLP hat, but I've read a fair amount of rhetoric at some point. One book I found absolutely fascinating was in French, unfortunately, about by a very, very senior semiotician called Marc Angelot. And he made 2 or 3 claims. One of them is, okay, first, we know by experience that our people rarely get to trust one another when they're arguing, right? I mean, arguing rarely convinces people. And one reason arguing rarely convinces people is that people will accuse one another of being irrational and using sophistry and using flawed arguments. And there's been this whole tradition of recording these are the proper argument schemes and these are the improper argument schemes. I often refer to argument schemes. His general point is he didn't go the whole let's document proper and improper argument schemes like Walton did. He's a classic rhetorician, as I said. He's saying, or semiotician, but trained in rhetoric. He studied pamphlets a lot. His specialty is pamphlets. And he's saying, most, he calls them tropes, not as in story tropes, but as in argumentation tropes. Most tropes are actually heuristics. They're not irrational or rational. They're valid in some cases and invalid in other cases. And they're not, and what is really interesting, so saying your reasoning is invalid because it uses this trope, well, yeah, it's not absolutely valid because the trope is a heuristic, but it's not absolutely invalid, or rarely. What is different is that different subcommunities have different tropes that they rely on and that they consider as mostly valid. So they will use this trope, and another subcommunity will hear that trope and say, well, no, that's irrational, that's not valid. And then he gets into giving specific examples, and he gives 4 big examples. He's saying, for example, in conservatives will often use the slippery slope argument. And again, slippery slope, there are cases where it works, and there are cases where it's utter bullshit. He says, on the other hand, the communists and anarchists will often use kind of binarity argument, is that the world is terrible, this is a feature of the world, so the exact opposite is good. Right?
Sorry, so is there another way you can...
See, the world is terrible, it's because look at this thing that is why the world is terrible, so let's do the exact opposite. So
I see, I think, yeah.
Yeah, kind of flipping things to the binary opposite instead of finding the, you know, middle ground or
a reason why, yeah.
The notion of there's the of course the people who are into conspiracy theories who say, well, if there's no proof, it's because it was hidden. And again, there are real conspiracies, it happens, but you know, the absence of proof is proof of a hidden conspiracy. Proof of hiding is very hard to believe on its face, but yeah, that's a trope. And he gave the bureaucratic argument: if this could work, it would have been done. Which again, new things happen. But again, sometimes it's true. It's a heuristic. If this could work, maybe it's because it's too simplistic. But maybe.
Those are interesting. Those are all really good. Those 4, specifically, like the conspiracy one. What I immediately think of to kind of counter that is if something I've heard is if your explanation or justification can be used to justify anything, well, then it's just not bad. Like if you can use that example over here as well and over here, well, you're not helpful. It's not being helpful. Yeah,
exactly. No, I'm with you. And each of them has specific counters and yada, yada, yada. But what's interesting is if you're in this community, this mode of reasoning is generally accepted. And then you talk to someone else and it's like, what are you smoking, right? but the notion that communities have specific tropes and have, of course, specific ways of expressing these tropes. The book doesn't go into that as much, but it's obvious to me that different subcommunities will have a different way to express a certain line of argument because this trope is accepted, so there'll be a shorthand to express a certain reasoning scheme, argumentation scheme, if that scheme is well accepted in that community. And the notion that different communities have different schemes, I thought was extremely worth digging into.
Absolutely. What was the guy's name again?
His name is Marc Angenot. And the book is Dialogue de Sourds. It was not translated.
Still want to note it in my second brain.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Traité de rhétorique antilogique. That's funny.
Interesting. Well, yeah. So if going back to this, building it like a chain, a model that uses a model here or a model there, depending on what task you want to do, I think gets into even what Tim had asked just recently in Slack is, are we at the point yet where we can just run a conversation through an LLM and it'll output an argument map from that conversation? And I think Yeah, that would be
Uh,
fantastic too.
This is totally the case, and it's totally not the case that it will do so reliably.
Yes, right. This is very true. So
Uh,
each part of the chain you need to be able to inspect.
Absolutely. There was a fascinating Simon Buckingham Shum, who is, let me find this. He was one of the old hands in dialogue mapping and argumentation mapping. And he did an experiment where he got basically, it's quite interesting. I think it's a blog post, and here's the blog post. He fed a conversation to an LLM and got it to generate Artbound.
Great, I think I remember this. Yeah.
And but it was also, oh, here's a claim that was not in the source. Hey, that's not in the source. No, it's in the source. It would even argue that it would even stick to its fabrications.
That's it. It's very bothersome that that is the fact. Like, even when I'm just using it for my daily whatever, let's say I want to transfer, I want the LLM to transfer a rather long list of bullet points into markdown table format. I don't
Right.
even trust it to do that because I worry that it's just going to mix up some of the words and invent some of the claim, like some of the whatever the text was. So I can't trust it to do that yet. I imagine there's going to be solutions soon, but currently it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know, why would there be solutions soon? The technology is inherently fragile.
I think the solutions come from the chains, being able to take the output and then using another tool to compare it to say
No,
yes
that
or
is,
no.
yeah,
And
that's true. But well, my feeling about the chains is that on the one hand, yes, you can, and it's totally possible to use them to do double checking. I'm all for it. But it's also, if the chain is long and complex and you're kind of compounding errors, and there's more and more steps where you don't know what's happened because it's happened inside the chain. And you don't know if the steps have been totally ridiculous. So I think if I were doing complex chains, I definitely want, okay, show me all the steps because I want to check. I want humans to be involved still, but I know that that's me. I'm pretty old-fashioned that way, and a lot of people are like, how much can we automate and how much can we get rid of humans? And but there's no question that there's getting claim extraction is something that will definitely be automated in the very near future. But yeah, people have to be very careful about reliability.
I'm interested also in the speed at which claim extraction will become like common. I think just dependent on who is using it and who's funding it, you know, what are the motivations behind it, and how.
Absolutely true.
My question is like, how prevalent is it, or is it just no one really actually cares? No one, when I say no one, I mean the general populace.
I think some people do care. I think it's something that will happen. And especially now that the governments are getting aware of the disinformation warfare as a practice. But I also think that disinformation warfare will also mean that automated argument extraction will be working on a lot of garbage. And there's already an effect where there's more and more AI output text out there on the web, and that poisons the training.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see.
And there's more and more bias attacks against training sets.
A related worry that someone brought up that I heard was like if you're, let's say you're in an IDE and you want, you know, so the IDE to do fix the TypeScript or fix the bug or what have you. So instead of going to Stack Overflow, let's say it comes right into your IDE, but over time that'll make people not want to post to Stack Overflow because it's not being read. So then at what point is there nothing to then feed back into the system? There's no actual
Absolutely.
content to, and how do we deal with that?
That what I think will happen is the AI is probably capturing what it's doing, and that will become the next training set, but including your corrections to its work. But I mean, if you're not that good at correcting it, and there's no process, again, people upvoting the good solutions as opposed to somebody accepting crap blindly and because they're amateurs.
Yeah.
My other concern, and there's so many concerns about AI.
Yeah.
The people are trusting, a lot of people will trust AI more, and that means less control over the work and less, I'm afraid of the population scale, people shifting to whatever the AI proposes. And that makes the AI poisoning or the AI bias even more toxic. But that's a totally different order of concern.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But all the more reason that we need the canonical debate.
Yes, absolutely. But the more reason that we need to be very explicit about this is machine generated, this is human generated, please, let's have a human feedback on this, because we don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
I should run you through the claim minor base. I'll try to prepare that for next week. I think it is actually a good use of my time. Sorry, I didn't think of preparing it today.
No,
you know, I'm working, most of my time right now, I've decided to work on event sourcing because I see it as necessary to building everything on top of that. It's progressing. I'm really happy with where I'm going with that, but it's probably good to show that next week as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And make sure you dumb it down to a level that I can understand if you have time.
Event sourcing is not complicated.
Okay, good.
What I'm doing with it may be a bit more interesting because there's so many moving parts. But the notion of event sourcing is we basically store mutable state in a database. We all do that. The problem is if you don't know, if you make a mistake, you don't know how you got to that state. So the idea of event sourcing is let's store the events. Let's store the actual, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. And if we store the events, it's possible to reapply, like correct if we have a function that says, well, this is the state that you obtain from these events, you can correct the function, reapply it to the event history and get a new corrected state. And it makes a lot of things much easier in terms of, well, it makes some things harder because we always have versioning, right? We always, oh, this is a new version of the database schema, this is a new version of this, that, and the other. Now, of course, the problem of schema versioning becomes one of event versioning. But that's not a terrible problem because events are simpler in a way than schemas. And the idea that you can always recalculate the new schema, in event sourcing, they call them projections. And you may or may not materialize them in the database. So in the system I'm doing, I'm actually making a little system that will make the projections into little JavaScript snippets. And if they're JavaScript snippets, it means that they can send or eventually, I hope, WASM snippets. So those are the event handlers, sorry, the folding function that says, state at time t, state of this projection at time t, new event, state at time t+1. And if it's a snippet, it means it can happen either client-side or server-side. And you can do optimistic programming also, because you don't have to wait for the backend to apply the snippet, because you know what's going to happen because you have the folding function locally. And if you make a mistake, well, you just go back in time. Or if the thing fails, you go back in time and reapply it. So not everything can be computed by these snippets. There are some significant calculations that are more complex than that, but I think a lot of the state can be done in little snippets. And it's anyway coherent to have CQRS pattern, separate the commands and the query, so that you just have a flow of commands that updates an incremental state, and make that into a event streaming solution. But event streaming is just one part. Event sourcing is saying the event log is the source of truth. The ultimate source of truth.
Storing the event log, is that going to get difficult? Is it going to get large, very large?
It can get large. What you can do if you worry about that eventually is storing snapshots of the state at a given time, and then you can forget events earlier in the snapshot. But let's face it, storage is not a huge deal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And especially if and events are usually pretty concise.
So how is event sourcing in events different than just GitHub or Git saving a commit? Is it similar, different? How does that?
Good. It's related. Git is storing basically the commits are in some ways like events, yes. But it does also store the snapshot. It's kind of mixed in Git, whether you're getting the snapshot or the diff for a given commit. Of course, it stores a snapshot of the latest state and doesn't store all the past states. It just stores the commit. So yeah, it's pretty close. The advantage of CQRS is you can have arbitrary semantics on the events. The events can be high-level events. Like in Git, for example, and that's a limitation of Git, not of the Git model, but Git in particular, if you move a file, it kind of knows, but it doesn't. It's just that file got deleted and that file got created.
That's actually, I ran into that and I didn't like it because I use Git to store all my Obsidian notes. But if I want to just rename the file, it's all the history of that is just gone, but not.
Yeah. And the idea is in CQRS, you can have arbitrary semantics on your events so that everything that happens as a consequence of this event can be one coherent thing.
Interesting. Yeah. CQRS.
So I've been, and what I'm trying to do is make an event sourcing system where, because I'm defining this snippet thing, I can make the engine receive new event types and new projections and new handlers as data without restarting the server. So I'm making it a kind of universal event sourcing engine. You see what I'm saying?
A little bit. It would be really good to see it in practice. I'd love to
yeah.
visually.
Yeah. And I'm also making it very JSON LD friend and are, you know, JSON LD friendly.
Nice. Yeah.
So that's part of the way I'm doing my little my little event sourcing thing.
I'm gonna make a task myself. Hopefully this next week I can take some time to look into event sourcing to come a little bit prepared to when you do have time to share it.
Okay, when it's a bit more sharing worthy, which should not be too long. I hope by next week I'll have something interesting to share. Okay, I think there's a lot that I haven't prepared, and thanks a lot for that reference. And we'll see what's next.
Sounds good. Yeah, and maybe there'll be a bunch more people next week. It's the first of the month. Maybe we should highlight that on Slack and be like, hey, important meeting for no reason, but important meeting.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you.
Have a good day.
You too.